Welcome back to the channel. What if the smallest coin you have ever ignored, the dull copper penny from 1974 that once slipped through millions of hands without a second thought, could secretly be the reason fortunes were made and history was rewritten? Imagine opening an old drawer, a forgotten piggy bank, or a dusty jar and finding a 1974 1-cent USA coin that looks ordinary yet carries a story so powerful it reshaped collecting culture, fueled global fascination, and ignited dreams of overnight wealth. This is not just another penny tale. This is the unbelievable journey of the 1974 1-cent coin that stunned experts, challenged assumptions, and became linked to a face value legend whispered to be as high as $27 million. A number so shocking it forces you to rethink everything you know about small change. Because in 1974 America was changing, inflation was biting, the economy was uneasy, and the humble penny was still a daily companion, minted in staggering numbers. Overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted, yet within those billions struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints existed rare anomalies, metal variations, minting errors, and condition miracles that would later ignite bidding wars and rewrite price guides. Collectors decades later would look back at 1974 not as an ordinary year but as a turning point when subtle differences created massive gaps in value, when a single coin with the right characteristics could leap from pocket change to legendary status. The 1974 1-cent coin is a Lincoln Memorial penny, bearing the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, a design so common it almost fades into the background of daily life, yet that familiarity hides the drama beneath. Because rarity does not always come from low mintage alone, it comes from survival, condition, errors, composition questions, and timing. And in 1974 the United States Mint was navigating metal supply pressures, experimenting, adjusting, and producing coins at incredible speed, which opened the door to mistakes, transitional pieces, off-metal strikes, doubled dies, misaligned presses, weak strikes, and planchet anomalies, all of which today fuel the most extreme valuations. The legend of the $27 million face value attached to a 1974 penny is not about the average coin you find in circulation, it is about the perfect storm example. A coin preserved in pristine condition, possibly struck on the wrong metal or bearing dramatic doubling or unique mint characteristics, authenticated, graded at the absolute top of the scale, and chased by elite collectors who are not just buying metal but buying history, prestige, and the right to own something almost no one else can. When people hear $27 million tied to a penny they laugh, then they pause, then curiosity takes over. Because time and again the coin world has proven that impossibilities become realities when rarity meets desire. Think of how once ignored coins later shattered records, and the 1974 1-cent has carved its own space in that tradition. Collectors dissect every detail, the mint mark or lack of it, the sharpness of Lincoln's profile, the clarity of the memorial steps, the color designation red, red-brown, or brown, the tiniest carbon spot that could mean the difference between thousands and millions. The microscopic doubling in lettering that only trained eyes once noticed but now fuels viral searches, videos, and stories shared across the world. The 1974 penny became a symbol of hope for everyday people, because unlike ancient gold coins locked away in museums, this coin came from circulation, from cash registers, from change received after buying groceries, from childhood collections started with curiosity rather than wealth. And that accessibility is what makes the story explode across social platforms, because anyone could theoretically have one. Anyone could check, anyone could dream, and that dream is powerful. It keeps people searching rolls, checking inherited collections, and learning about numismatics, transforming casual curiosity into serious passion. And with each passing year fewer pristine examples survive, copper darkens, surfaces mark, coins are lost, melted, or damaged, pushing the finest known examples into even greater demand. Auction houses know this, collectors know this. And narratives build around the most exceptional specimens, stories of a 1974 1-cent coin selling privately, stories of aggressive bidding, stories whispered in collector circles about valuations that reach jaw-dropping levels. Whether realized or projected, these stories fuel the legend, and legends are currency in themselves. The $27 million figure represents the peak of possibility, the absolute ceiling that combines rarity, perfection, provenance, and timing. It is not about what every 1974 penny is worth, but about what the best conceivable one could be worth in the right moment, and that distinction matters, because it teaches collectors that knowledge is power, that understanding mint history, grading standards, and market psychology can turn an ordinary object into an extraordinary asset. The 1974 1-cent story also reflects a broader truth about history, that value is not fixed, it evolves. What was common yesterday can be rare tomorrow, what was ignored can become celebrated. And in a world where digital assets rise and fall overnight, the enduring fascination with a physical coin reminds us that tangible history still holds unmatched allure. People connect emotionally to coins, they imagine who held them, where they traveled, what moments they witnessed, and a 1974 penny lived through decades of American life, through cultural shifts, technological revolutions, and economic cycles, surviving long enough to be rediscovered and reimagined as a treasure. That emotional connection amplifies its appeal beyond charts and catalogs, making the story viral, shareable, and endlessly retold. Beginners hear about it and feel inspired, seasoned collectors feel challenged, skeptics feel curious, and content creators find endless angles to explore, from error hunting to grading guides, from market speculation to historical context, and every retelling adds another layer to the mythos. The idea that a 1-cent coin could carry a $27 million narrative shakes assumptions and invites people to look closer at the everyday, to question what else might be hiding in plain sight, and that mindset is contagious. It spreads across communities, turning simple coin checks into moments of excitement. And while most 1974 pennies will remain modest in value, the possibility, however slim, keeps the hunt alive, keeps attention focused, and keeps the story trending, because hope is a powerful driver, and the 1974 1-cent USA coin embodies that hope. A reminder that history sometimes rewards patience, curiosity, and care, that small things can have big stories, and that value is often discovered long after creation. So the next time you see a penny dated 1974, do not dismiss it, look at it, study it, imagine its journey, and remember that somewhere out there exists an example that turned a simple cent into a symbol of big money history, a coin that captured imaginations and redefined what was possible. And if stories like this ignite your curiosity, inspire your search, and make you see everyday objects differently, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected for more incredible hidden history and unbelievable coin stories that prove sometimes the smallest change can change everything. Next, 1979 1-cent USA coin. What if the most overlooked penny of the late 20th century, the quiet 1979 1-cent USA coin that passed through millions of hands during gas shortages, arcade games, school lunches, and everyday purchases, is actually tied to one of the most astonishing money legends ever told. Imagine a coin so common it blended into the background of daily life, yet so powerful in its rarest form that it carries a face value story whispered to reach an unbelievable $26 million, a number that stops people mid-sentence and forces them to look twice at the smallest denomination in American history. This is the story of the 1979 1-cent coin, not as loose change but as a phenomenon, a symbol of hidden potential, and a reminder that history often hides its greatest surprises in plain sight, because 1979 was a year of transition, uncertainty, and motion in the United States. Inflation lingered, technology was evolving, and the minting process itself was under constant pressure to keep up with demand. Billions of pennies were produced, yet within that ocean of copper-colored discs existed subtle variations that would later become the focus of intense scrutiny, passionate debate, and relentless searching by collectors across generations. The 1979 1-cent coin continued the Lincoln Memorial design, familiar and comforting. But familiarity breeds neglect, and neglect is where rarity sometimes grows, because while most of these coins circulated freely, picked up scratches, stains, and where a microscopic fraction survived untouched, perfectly struck, sharply detailed, glowing with original mint luster, and it is these survivors that fuel the legend of extraordinary value, The idea of a $26 million face value attached to a penny is not about exaggeration for entertainment alone. It represents the theoretical and sometimes whispered pinnacle of what happens when an already scarce top condition example intersects with unique mint characteristics, dramatic errors, off-metal strikes, doubled dies, or transitional anomalies, all authenticated, graded at the absolute highest level, and desired by elite collectors who view such a coin as a crown jewel rather than spare change. The 1979 penny exists at the crossroads of old and new numismatics, when modern minting techniques were advanced yet still imperfect, leaving room for mistakes that today ignite viral interest. And as collectors began to realize that modern coins could be just as valuable as older classics under the right circumstances, attention shifted, and years like 1979 came under the microscope. Every letter, every digit, every memorial line studied with intensity. Collectors learned that even the smallest doubling in the date, the slightest misalignment, or the faintest off-metal clue could separate a common coin from a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And the internet age magnified this fascination, because suddenly stories traveled fast, images were shared instantly, and the idea that a penny from your childhood could be worth more than a mansion spread like wildfire. The 1979 1-cent coin became a beacon for beginners and veterans alike, beginners because it felt accessible, veterans because it offered new challenges, and storytellers because it carried drama, hope, and shock value all at once. And as years passed, pristine examples became harder to find. Copper tones darkened, surfaces deteriorated, and the population of top-grade coins shrank, increasing competition and pushing hypothetical values higher, because markets are driven not just by supply and demand but by narrative, and the narrative of the 1979 penny is irresistible. It ties personal memory to financial fantasy, everyday experience to elite collecting, and that emotional bridge is powerful. People remember holding pennies as children, stacking them, counting them, spending them without thought, and when they learn that one of those pennies could be linked to a $26 million story, imagination takes over. Suddenly drawers are searched, jars are opened, collections are revisited, and curiosity turns into education. People learn about mint marks, strike quality, grading scales, and the difference between ordinary and extraordinary. And that learning process itself adds value to the story, because knowledge transforms perception. The 1979 1-cent is no longer just copper, it is history, economics, art, and psychology combined, and auction houses understand this dynamic. They know that the finest known examples of modern coins can spark intense bidding when the right buyers converge, because ownership of such a coin is about legacy, about being part of a narrative that will be told and retold. And while public record sales may not always match the most extreme whispered valuations, the possibility remains, and possibility is what drives legends. The $26 million figure represents the outer edge of imagination grounded in precedent. Because time and again coins once considered ordinary have shattered expectations when rarity, condition, and desire aligned, and the 1979 penny sits firmly within that tradition, reminding us that value is not fixed at the moment of creation but evolves with time, scarcity, and cultural interest, and as the years roll on, fewer opportunities remain to find untouched examples, fewer chances to uncover dramatic errors, making each discovery feel more urgent, more exciting, and more meaningful. And beyond money, the story resonates because it challenges assumptions. It tells us that worth is not always obvious, that patience can reveal treasures, and that even the smallest objects can carry outsized impact. The 1979 1-cent USA coin encapsulates this lesson perfectly, a quiet witness to history that later stepped into the spotlight, captivating collectors, inspiring content, and fueling endless discussion. And whether or not anyone ever holds the mythical example tied to the full $26 million face value legend, the story itself has already paid dividends in curiosity, education, and wonder, encouraging people to slow down, look closer, and appreciate the hidden layers of the world around them. So the next time a 1979 penny crosses your path, do not rush past it, consider its journey, its potential, And the remarkable truth that even the smallest denomination can carry the weight of history and the spark of extraordinary possibility. And if stories like this keep you searching, learning, and dreaming about what might be hiding in plain sight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay connected for more unbelievable coin stories that prove big money history often starts with just 1 cent. Next, 1972 1 cent USA coin. What if one of the most ordinary pennies ever minted, a small copper-colored coin dated 1972 that once rattled in pockets, slipped under couch cushions, and rested forgotten in jars across America, is actually connected to one of the most staggering value legends in monetary history? Imagine the shock of discovering that a single 1972 1 cent USA coin, something so common it was nearly invisible, carries a face value story whispered to reach an astonishing $29 million, a figure so massive it forces the mind to pause, rewind, and reconsider everything believed about small change, because this is not just a coin story, it is a reflection of how history, rarity, condition, and human fascination collide to transform the everyday into the extraordinary. The year 1972 was a moment of transition in the United States, a time when society was shifting. Technology was advancing, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to keep up with demand. Pennies flowed endlessly through commerce, and no one at the time imagined that one of these humble cents would later be spoken of in the same breath as priceless treasures, yet within that vast production existed subtle differences that would later become legendary. The 1972 1 cent coin, part of the Lincoln Memorial Series, carried Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile on the front and the iconic memorial on the reverse, a design so widely recognized it faded into the background of daily life. But familiarity often hides secrets, because it was in 1972 that one of the most famous double-die varieties ever known captured the attention of collectors, creating a benchmark for modern penny collecting and proving beyond doubt that modern coins could hold breathtaking value. This realization reshaped numismatics, turning casual observers into dedicated hunters and inspiring generations to inspect their change more carefully. The legend of the $29 million face value attached to a 1972 penny does not suggest that every coin from that year is worth a fortune. Instead, it represents the absolute pinnacle, the most perfect storm of rarity, dramatic minting error, pristine preservation, top-tier grading, and timing, all converging into a single object that transcends its metal content and becomes a symbol of possibility. Because the 1972 double-die penny is not subtle, it is bold, dramatic, and unmistakable when seen correctly. The doubling in the date and lettering is strong, clear, and mesmerizing, making it one of the most studied and celebrated errors in U.S. coinage. And yet, even within this famous variety, condition separates the common from the legendary, because most examples circulated, picked up marks, lost luster, and aged with time, while only a microscopic number survived untouched, blazing with original mint brilliance, sharp details, and flawless surfaces. And it is these survivors that fuel dreams of unimaginable value. Collectors know that perfection is rare, especially for copper coins, which are notoriously sensitive to handling, air, and environment, making high-grade examples exponentially scarcer as decades pass. And scarcity breeds desire, desire drives competition, and competition pushes values into realms that seem unbelievable to outsiders. The $29 million figure represents the outer edge of that dynamic. The ceiling of what could happen if the finest known 1972 1 cent coin, perhaps a spectacular double die example graded at the highest level ever recorded, were to appear at the perfect moment when elite collectors, institutions, and investors converge, each driven not just by money but by the pursuit of owning a piece of numismatic legend, because owning such a coin is about more than wealth. It is about legacy, about being written into the story of collecting history, about holding something that countless others have searched for and failed to find. The 1972 penny became a cultural icon within the coin world, frequently cited as the proof that checking your change matters, that education pays off, and that history sometimes rewards curiosity. And as stories spread through magazines, auctions, online forums, and viral videos, the legend only grew stronger, inspiring people around the world to look again at what they once ignored, and that ripple effect has value of its own, because it brings new life into the hobby, new voices into the conversation, and new appreciation for the artistry and complexity of minting. The story also highlights how value evolves over time, because when these coins were struck, they were worth exactly 1 cent, nothing more, nothing less. They bought almost nothing, yet decades later they carry narratives worth millions, reminding us that value is not fixed, it is discovered, negotiated, and shaped by human interest, and in an age dominated by digital numbers on screens. The idea that a small physical object can hold such immense worth feels grounding, almost magical. People can touch it, see it, hold it, and imagine the journey it took from mint presses in 1972 to the spotlight of modern collecting. Imagine the hands it passed through, the moments it witnessed, the chance survival that allowed it to remain pristine while billions of others faded into obscurity, and this emotional layer amplifies the appeal, making the story of the 1972 1-cent coin endlessly shareable, endlessly fascinating, and endlessly inspiring. Beginners hear it and feel hope, seasoned collectors feel respect, skeptics feel curiosity, and storytellers find a narrative that blends history, drama, and possibility into one compelling arc. The coin becomes a mirror reflecting broader truths about life, that opportunity often hides in plain sight, that patience and knowledge can unlock unexpected rewards, and that small beginnings can lead to extraordinary outcomes. The 1972 1-cent USA coin stands as a reminder that even in a world overflowing with mass-produced objects, individuality and rarity still matter, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we almost overlook. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1972, pause for a moment, look closely, appreciate its design, consider its history, and remember that somewhere out there exists an example that redefined expectations, challenged assumptions, and carried a face value legend of $29 million into the heart of big money history. And if stories like this spark your imagination, motivate your search, and deepen your appreciation for hidden value all around you, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected for more unbelievable coin stories that prove even 1 cent can change everything. Next, 1968 D 1-cent USA coin. What if the smallest coin from a turbulent era? A simple 1968 D 1-cent USA coin that once lived quietly in pockets during a time of social change, war headlines, and economic uncertainty, is actually connected to one of the most mind-bending value legends in American history. Imagine the shock of realizing that a penny minted in Denver in 1968, a year remembered for upheaval and transformation, carries a face value story whispered to reach an astonishing $35 million. A number so massive it seems impossible until you understand how rarity, condition, history, and human desire can collide to elevate the ordinary into the extraordinary. Because 1968 was not just another year at the United States Mint, it marked the early period after mint marks returned to U.S. coinage following their temporary removal in the mid-1960s. A decision originally made to discourage hoarding during coin shortages, and when mint marks came back, collectors paid attention, especially to Denver issues like the 1968 D penny, which became a focal point for those studying subtle differences in strike quality, die preparation, and minting consistency. Billions of pennies were produced to meet everyday demand, and at the time no one stopped to admire them. They were spent on candy, newspapers, bus fares, and small daily needs. Yet hidden among those masses were coins struck with exceptional sharpness, unusual characteristics, or rare minting anomalies that would only be recognized decades later. The 1968 D 1-cent coin continued the familiar Lincoln Memorial design, with Abraham Lincoln's profile facing right and the memorial standing proudly on the reverse, a design so common it almost disappeared into the background of American life. But within that familiarity lay the seeds of legend. Because modern pennies like the 1968 D taught collectors that age alone does not determine value, precision does, survival does, and uniqueness does, and as numismatics evolved, attention shifted toward condition rarity, the idea that while millions of coins might exist, only a handful survive in flawless or near flawless condition, especially for copper coins that are highly sensitive to handling, air, moisture, and storage conditions. And this is where the story of extreme value begins, because copper does not forgive carelessness, it darkens, spots, corrodes, and marks easily. Meaning that a 1968 penny that remains blazing red, sharply struck, free of contact marks, and perfectly preserved after more than half a century is already rare before any error or variety is even considered, and when you add the possibility of dramatic minting errors, such as doubled dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, or planchet anomalies, the rarity curve steepens dramatically, creating the foundation for valuations that sound unreal to outsiders. The whispered $35 million face value attached to a 1968 1-cent coin represents the absolute ceiling of this phenomenon, the ultimate convergence of perfection, rarity, and timing, not the value of the average circulated penny but the hypothetical peak value of the most extraordinary example imaginable, a coin so perfect and so unique that it becomes a singular object in the collecting world, chased by elite collectors, institutions, and investors who understand that such pieces are not just coins, they are trophies, symbols of achievement, and anchors of legacy, because owning the finest known example of a celebrated modern coin is about more than money, it is about being part of history, about holding something that countless others have searched for and failed to find, and the 1968 penny sits at a fascinating intersection of accessibility and exclusivity, accessible because millions were made and many still exist. Exclusive because only a microscopic fraction meet the criteria that drive extreme value, and this contrast fuels fascination. It tells people that treasure does not always come from ancient times or exotic places, sometimes it comes from your own country, your own era, even your own childhood, and that idea is powerful. It transforms passive observers into active participants. People start checking dates, mint marks, surfaces, and details, learning about grading scales, mint history, and error identification. And in doing so, they become part of a larger story, a community driven by curiosity and hope. The legend of the 1968 1-cent coin also reflects how narratives shape markets, because value is not only about metal and scarcity, it is about stories people believe in, stories that are repeated, refined, and shared across generations, stories that connect personal memory with financial fantasy, and the late 1960s carry emotional weight for many, making coins from that era especially evocative. A 1968 penny is not just copper, it is a physical link to a time of change, and when that link is combined with the possibility of extraordinary value, it captures imagination in a way few other objects can. Auction houses understand this emotional dimension. They know that when the right coin appears at the right time, with the right story and the right buyers, prices can defy expectations, because competition among passionate collectors can push bids far beyond rational calculations. Driven by the desire to own something truly special, something that will be talked about long after the hammer falls, and while not every legend is realized in a public sale, the existence of the possibility is enough to keep interest alive, enough to keep the story trending, enough to inspire endless searches and discussions. The $35 million figure associated with the 1968 penny stands as a symbol of ultimate potential, the outer boundary of what could happen if all factors align perfectly. And whether or not such a valuation is ever publicly confirmed, the impact of the story is undeniable. It has already changed how people view modern pennies, how they approach collecting, and how they understand value itself, reminding us that worth is not always obvious at first glance, that patience can reveal hidden layers, and that even the smallest objects can carry immense significance. The 1968 1-cent USA coin embodies these lessons, a quiet witness to history that later emerged as a symbol of big money dreams, educational curiosity, and the enduring allure of tangible artifacts in a digital age. And as time continues to pass, pristine examples will only become rarer, errors will remain elusive, and the legend will only grow stronger, fueling future generations of collectors and storytellers. So the next time you see a penny dated 1968 with a small d beneath the date, do not dismiss it, take a closer look, appreciate its journey, And remember that somewhere out there exists an example that turned 1 cent into a $35 million legend in the history of American coinage. And if stories like this keep you curious, inspired, and searching for hidden value in everyday life, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected for more unbelievable coin stories that prove sometimes the smallest change carries the biggest history. And as this story stretches further into the deeper layers of numismatic fascination, the 1968 1 cent USA coin continues to unfold like a long-forgotten chapter of American history that refuses to stay quiet, because beyond minting facts and condition rarity lies the human element. The countless untold moments when this penny exchanged hands during one of the most emotionally charged periods of the 20th century, passed from cashier to customer, from parent to child, from worker to store owner, absorbing the energy of an era marked by change, uncertainty, and resilience. And it is this invisible journey that adds weight to its legend, because collectors do not just chase metal, they chase stories, and the 1968 penny carries the emotional fingerprint of a generation, a time when America stood at a crossroads, and that resonance magnifies its appeal far beyond its copper content. As decades passed and the coin quietly aged, the world around it transformed. Technology accelerated, currencies shifted toward digital forms, yet this small physical object endured, surviving drawers, jars, collections, and sometimes sheer luck. And with every passing year the odds of finding a flawless survivor diminished, making the finest known examples even more mythical, even more desirable, because copper remembers everything, every touch, every drop, every exposure. And only the most carefully preserved pieces escape time unscathed. And this is where the dream of $35 million finds its foundation, not in exaggeration but in mathematics of scarcity and desire. Because when only one or two examples exist at the highest imaginable level, the market ceases to behave rationally and instead responds emotionally, driven by pride, prestige, and the hunger to own something that cannot be easily replaced, something that will be talked about in hushed tones at conventions, auctions, and private meetings. And this hunger transforms a penny into a prize, a symbol of triumph within the collecting world. The 1968 1 cent coin also teaches a powerful lesson about timing, because value is not only about rarity but about when rarity is recognized. For years these coins sat unnoticed, their potential unrealized, until education spread, reference books evolved, grading standards tightened, and collectors learned to see what was once invisible. And when perception changes, markets follow. This is why stories of extraordinary value often emerge long after minting, because it takes time for knowledge to mature and for survivors to reveal themselves. And as this knowledge spreads through online platforms, videos, forums, and shared experiences, the legend grows louder, more convincing, more contagious, inspiring people across continents to check their coins, to ask questions, to learn, and to believe that discovery is still possible in a world that feels increasingly mapped and measured. And that belief is priceless, because it reconnects people with curiosity, patience, and observation, qualities often lost in fast-moving digital life. The 1968 penny becomes a bridge between generations, older collectors remembering when these coins were new, younger ones discovering them as potential treasures, both united by the same spark of possibility. And this shared pursuit strengthens the story, making it resilient, enduring, and endlessly repeatable. Because legends survive not only through facts but through participation, and every person who checks a penny becomes part of the legend, even if they never find the mythical example. And beyond the individual, the coin represents a broader truth about history itself, that value is layered, that significance accumulates over time, and that even objects designed for the most mundane purposes can evolve into artifacts of immense importance. The 1968 1 cent USA coin stands as proof that history does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers, waiting for the right ears to listen, and as long as people continue to search, learn, and share, the whisper grows into a roar, carrying with it dreams of discovery and stories of transformation. And while not everyone will uncover a $35 million penny, everyone who engages with the story gains something: knowledge, curiosity, inspiration, and a deeper appreciation for the hidden complexity of the world around them. And that may be the greatest value of all, because it changes how people see the ordinary, encouraging them to slow down and look closer, to question assumptions, and to recognize that potential often hides where least expected. And as time continues its relentless march forward, the 1968 Pennies legend will only intensify, because survivors will become fewer, condition rarities more extreme, and stories more refined, passed down through generations of collectors and storytellers who keep the flame alive, ensuring that this small coin continues to occupy an outsized place in the imagination of those who believe that even 1 cent can hold the power to change a life, rewrite a narrative, and stand as a timeless reminder that big money history sometimes begins with the smallest change. So stay curious, stay searching, and never underestimate the quiet power of a single penny. And if this journey through hidden value, forgotten history, and extraordinary possibility keeps you inspired and hungry for more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and remain connected for more unbelievable stories that prove the greatest treasures are often hiding right in front of us. Next, 1978 1 cent USA coin. What if one of the most underestimated pennies of the late 70s, a simple 1978 1 cent USA coin that once passed silently through vending machines, school cafeterias, corner stores, and countless everyday transactions, is actually tied to one of the most jaw-dropping value legends ever whispered in the world of money. Imagine holding a small copper coin dated 1978, and realizing that behind its ordinary appearance lies a story connected to a face value legend, said to reach an astonishing $27 million, a number so extreme that it instantly transforms curiosity into obsession and forces people to rethink what they believe about value, because the story of the 1978 1 cent coin is not about fantasy alone, it is about how rarity, condition, history, human psychology, and timing can align to elevate the smallest denomination into the realm of big money history. The year 1978 was a distinctive moment in America, balance between old traditions and a rapidly modernizing future. Inflation still lingered in memory, technology was accelerating, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to produce enormous quantities of coins to support daily commerce. Billions of pennies were struck, circulated widely, and quickly worn down by use. And because they were everywhere, they were ignored, spent without thought, dropped into jars, lost under furniture, and rarely saved with care. Yet it is precisely this neglect that allowed the legend to grow, because rarity is not always about how many coins were minted, it is about how many survived in exceptional condition, and for copper coins like the 1978 penny, survival in pristine state is extraordinarily difficult. Copper reacts, tones, spots, scratches, and marks easily, meaning that a flawless survivor decades later is already rare before any special characteristic is even considered. The 1978 1 cent coin continued the familiar Lincoln Memorial design, Abraham Lincoln's profile steady and dignified on the front, the memorial on the back, a design Americans had seen for years, so common it barely registered in the mind. But familiarity often hides importance, because collectors later learned that modern coins could harbor just as much excitement as older classics, and when attention turned to years like 1978, subtle differences began to matter enormously: strike sharpness, die quality, surface preservation, mint luster, and minute errors suddenly became the dividing line between ordinary and extraordinary. And as numismatics evolved, condition rarity became a dominant force, meaning that while millions of 1978 pennies still exist, only a microscopic fraction qualify as true elite examples, and it is within this fraction that the legend of $27 million finds its roots. Because when a coin reaches the absolute top of the grading scale, when it combines blazing original color, razor-sharp detail, and near-perfect surfaces, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a singular object, a benchmark, a reference point against which all others are measured. And when such a coin also carries unusual mint characteristics, dramatic errors, or anomalies created during the high-speed minting process, its desirability multiplies, because errors tell stories of imperfection within precision, moments when machines and humans intersected in unexpected ways, producing something unrepeatable, and collectors are drawn to these moments because they represent individuality in a sea of sameness. The whispered $27 million face value associated with the 1978 1-cent coin represents the ultimate expression of this dynamic, the theoretical ceiling where the finest imaginable example meets peak demand, intense competition, and perfect timing. It is not the value of the average circulated penny. It is the value of the one coin that stands alone, the one that collectors dream of, the one that could redefine records and headlines if it ever appeared publicly. And this idea alone is enough to fuel endless fascination, because it transforms the act of checking change into a treasure hunt. It gives meaning to small details, it rewards patience and education, and it keeps the hobby alive. People around the world hear the story and feel a spark. They remember pennies from childhood, jars filled with coins, collections inherited from relatives. And suddenly those memories are charged with possibility, and that emotional connection is powerful. Because value is not only numerical, it is emotional, and the 1978 penny bridges everyday life with extraordinary potential, making it one of the most shareable and compelling stories in modern coin lore. As years pass, the legend grows stronger. Because time works against survival, copper coins continue to age, pristine examples become scarcer, and knowledge spreads, bringing more eyes to fewer opportunities. And this imbalance intensifies demand, pushing hypothetical values higher, because markets are driven by both logic and desire often wins when prestige is at stake. Auction houses understand this psychology, collectors understand it, and stories circulate of private sales, whispered valuations, and fierce competition, all reinforcing the belief that modern pennies are not trivial, they are sleeping giants waiting for recognition. The 1978 1-cent coin stands as a symbol of this awakening, a reminder that value is not always obvious at first glance, that history continues to assign meaning long after creation, and that even objects designed for the smallest transactions can evolve into icons of wealth and fascination. Beyond money, the story resonates because it carries a lesson, that curiosity matters, that attention to detail can change outcomes, and that opportunity often hides where people least expect it, in the everyday, the routine, the overlooked. And this lesson spreads far beyond coin collecting, touching how people see the world itself, encouraging them to slow down, look closer, and question assumptions. And that is why the legend of the 1978 penny continues to trend, continues to inspire content, continues to draw new people into the hobby, because it is not just about finding a rare coin. It is about rediscovering wonder in the ordinary. And as long as that wonder exists, the story will live on, growing richer with every retelling, every search, and every dream of discovery. So the next time a 1978 1-cent USA coin crosses your path, pause before you dismiss it, consider its journey, its potential, and the remarkable truth that somewhere out there exists an example that turned 1 cent into a $27 million legend in the history of American money. And if stories like this keep your curiosity alive, fuel your passion, and make you eager to uncover what else might be hiding in plain sight, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected for more unbelievable coin stories that prove sometimes the smallest change carries the biggest value. And as the legend of the 1978 1-cent USA coin continues to expand, it reaches deeper into the psychology of collectors and everyday people alike. Because this penny represents more than metal and minting, it represents the idea that history is alive and still capable of surprising us, that even in a world where information feels instant and complete, mysteries remain hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. The 1978 penny traveled through an America filled with shifting values, changing technology, and evolving culture, passed through hands that never imagined it could one day be spoken of alongside multi-million-dollar treasures, and that contrast between humble origin and extraordinary potential is what gives the story its power, because it reminds people that greatness does not always announce itself loudly at birth, sometimes it whispers quietly for decades. And only those willing to listen closely will hear it. Collectors who study the 1978 1-cent coin often describe the thrill of discovery not as greed but as connection, a connection to the past, to craftsmanship, to the moment a coin was struck and released into the world. And when that connection is combined with the possibility of extreme value, the experience becomes unforgettable. The idea of a $27 million face value is not merely a number. It is a symbol of ultimate achievement within the hobby, the dream scenario where knowledge, patience, and luck align perfectly, and dreams like that fuel persistence. People keep searching rolls, inspecting inherited collections, revisiting childhood jars, not because success is guaranteed but because the possibility exists, and possibility changes behavior. It sharpens attention, encourages learning, and transforms routine actions into meaningful rituals. The 1978 penny thus becomes a gateway, introducing people to the deeper layers of numismatics, where they learn about die states, strike pressure, planchet quality, and grading nuances, and through this learning process, they gain appreciation for precision and detail that extends beyond coins into life itself. Because when you learn to see subtle differences in a penny, you learn to see subtle differences everywhere, and this awareness has value far beyond money. The story also highlights how markets are shaped by belief and consensus. Because a coin's worth is not only determined by rarity but by what people agree it represents, and when a narrative becomes strong enough, when enough people believe in its significance, value follows. This is why legendary coins often achieve prices that outsiders find irrational, because insiders are not just buying objects, they are buying status, history, and meaning, and the 1978 1-cent coin occupies a fascinating position in this ecosystem. It is modern enough to feel accessible yet old enough to feel historical. Common enough to be found yet rare enough at the top to be almost mythical, and this balance makes it endlessly compelling. As years pass, the legend will likely grow stronger rather than fade, because time will continue to reduce the number of pristine survivors, knowledge will continue to spread, and stories will continue to be told, refined, and amplified, each retelling adding emotional weight and cultural context, ensuring that the 1978 penny remains relevant to new generations of collectors who were not even born when it was minted, and in this way the coin becomes timeless, a small copper disc that transcends its era and speaks to universal themes of chance, value, and discovery. And perhaps that is why people are drawn to these stories, because they reflect a deeper hope, the hope that something extraordinary might still be waiting just around the corner, hidden within the ordinary. And that hope is powerful. It keeps curiosity alive in a world that often feels predictable. It encourages exploration, patience, and respect for detail, and it transforms a simple penny into a source of inspiration. The 1978 1-cent USA coin stands as a reminder that history is layered, that value evolves, and that even the smallest denomination can carry enormous meaning. And as long as people continue to search, learn, and dream, this legend will continue to shine, inviting everyone to look a little closer at what they once overlooked. Because sometimes the greatest treasures are not buried deep or locked away, they are right there in your hand, quietly waiting to be recognized. And if stories like this continue to spark your imagination and fuel your passion for hidden value and forgotten history, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected for more unbelievable stories that prove big money legends can begin with just 1 cent.